What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're talking about a brand new Shudder release, Violation. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's jump right into it and let's talk about Violation. This stars Madeline Sims-Fewer as Miriam, a troubled woman on the edge of divorce who returns home to her younger sister after years apart. But when her sister and brother-in-law betray her trust, she embarks on a vicious crusade of revenge. Madeline Sims-Fewer also co-wrote and co-directed this with Dusty Mancinelli. It premiered at TIFF in September and then did its rounds in the festival circuit before landing on Shudder today. And this one's a tough watch, to say the least. I'll just say this film gets pretty graphic a number of times, and with subject matter that also includes sexual assault and trauma, it can be uncomfortable to sit through. And because of that, I know this is something that not everyone will be clamoring to see. Also, something to keep in mind, it's a film that's very meticulously paced, feels incredibly grim, and will have shots that linger on some moments that will want you turning away. It's a horror film, but one that's firmly grounded in reality, with the horror stemming from the trauma that our lead character Miriam endures. Now, there's a fine line films have to walk when covering subject matter like what's seen here. There are times when movies tend to be very exploitative and include a lot of uncomfortable imagery for the sake of just trying to shock you, rather than because it actually adds anything meaningful to the story. Now, while I found a few scenes to have gone on a bit too long here, I don't think this film crosses that line. That doesn't mean it's an easy watch, and I totally get why it may not be something you're running to go see, but the way the film handles some of its more sensitive moments was carefully done, and they're not meant to be the film's centerpiece. In fact, this film's a revenge movie that doesn't romanticize the revenge. The movie that will most come to mind when thinking about this is Promising Young Woman, as that was another recent release that handles some of the same subject matter. The difference between the two, though, is that Promising Young Woman is a more stylized, darkly comic take on this sort of revenge that's meant to have a clear emotional satisfaction when certain actions are taken. On the other hand, this is anything but stylized, with a much darker color palette and brooding atmosphere that will leave you feeling anything but warm and fuzzy inside. It's a depressing, disturbing film, but it's also one that's just not here to make you feel down for the sake of it. It's a film with a purpose. And it's more about unpacking the trauma and grief that one endures when encountering these situations, and how, even if one were to go through with their revenge fantasy, it won't suddenly make them feel good. There's one part in what should be a satisfying moment for Miriam, which ends with a long shot of her having a visceral reaction to what she did, and we have this long take of her getting sick over it, and we in turn may also have a similar visceral reaction, or at least I almost did. And there are three other main characters besides Miriam: her husband Caleb, played by Obi Abili, her sister Greta, played by Anna Maguire, and her brother-in-law and childhood friend Dylan, played by Jesse Lavercombe. The first part of the film centers on them spending some time together at this cabin in the woods, and we can feel there's a lot of tension boiling among all of them. Miriam and Greta have this sort of rivalry that causes deep feelings of resentment between them. We also get there's some sort of tension between Miriam and Dylan, and meanwhile Miriam and Caleb are in a loveless marriage, and the way that Sims-Fewer and Mancinelli meticulously craft the tension in these dialogue-driven moments is enough to cause your stomach to turn. And it throws an interesting twist in the revenge genre because it paints a very morally complex picture that gets further explored as the film goes on. Now, I wouldn't call Miriam in particular someone who's totally unsympathetic, but when we first meet her, you realize that she's not exactly the easiest person to root for at first, which is something you don't often see in these sort of films. But then again, none of these characters are really all that sympathetic, mainly due to the deep-seated feelings of resentment compounding on one another and often undermining any sort of nice, brief moment they may have for a second, especially whenever Miriam tries approaching Greta with some tough conversations. Dylan winds up being the most despicable of all the characters for the way in which he betrays Miriam's trust and then gaslights her later on. However, the one character who feels like an afterthought, unfortunately, is Caleb. We don't really know why he and Miriam are unhappy with one another, and he's very emotionally distant and doesn't seem like he wants to be there, though we never really get to learn more about his character outside of surface level interactions. So as far as the characterization goes, this was the one area that I felt was weak, as I think expanding upon that fractured relationship would have strengthened parts of the story. The only other criticism I had for this was the structure, which cuts back and forth between present day sequences and flashbacks, which I don't think occurred too far before the main event. events. So because of the short time frame, it causes a sense of disorientation at certain points that I don't think was totally necessary, and it didn't really add much to the story. And I think the film could have been told chronologically, as it still would have packed the same punch, if not maybe a little more. Especially because there were scenes that, at first, didn't feel like they were warranted, only for us to realize that they're relevant, but we won't come to that realization until much later on in the film. Because of the morally complex nature of the characters and some of the subject matter, while it's a film that you can appreciate on the first watch, I also think it's one that will be appreciated more upon multiple viewings. Since you'll have a better understanding of the characters going into it on a second viewing, it might be easier to deconstruct certain interactions, especially in the opening sequences. However, because of how bleak and uncomfortable the film can be, I also know it's a film one won't immediately want to rewatch. Violation is one of the year's most disturbing, brutal movies, but it's not a film that wants to shock you just for the sake of it. While I think it lingers on some sequences just a bit too long, it's still a meticulously crafted movie with a purpose, filled with horror that stems from real-life trauma. It's filled with a lot of strong themes and morally complex characters that won't make it such a straightforward watch, though I still think it's worth checking out, but just be forewarned about some of its incredibly uncomfortable subject matter. Violation gets a 7.5 out of 10. So let me know, did you see Violation, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Were you able to get through this story? Do you have a favorite revenge movie? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.